Well, thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. It's awesome to, from the deepest parts of our hearts, I can't thank you so much to show up to honor Dad and the life he lived. It's, for me, particularly awesome just to see faces from the old days of Dad's church, and just to bring back a lot of great memories. So thank you for showing. I know a lot of you actually travel a fair bit of distance, so thank you for the family. So we're all just going to share a few memories or stories about Dad, and then we'll go from there. So I'll start it off. Dad and I, basically, our relationship, for the most part, was about sports, and that's how we connected. So, from the longest time I can remember, whether it's the playing catch in the yard, when I was pitching, and Dad would get a paint bucket out and sit on a paint bucket and had some flea market catcher's mitt that he found that I don't even know how he caught the ball with. But, to a lot of the one-on-one games in the driveway over on, what was it, Really Cash, right? So, the one-on-one stories are pretty funny just in the sense of, as the years went by and I got taller and eventually passed Dad up. And so even though I was taller, I could jump higher, and I was faster than Dad. I was very skinny, and Dad was not. So he adjusted his game appropriately, and it was always just to back me down. And he had this Kareem Abdul-Jabbar fadeaway hook shot that I could not block. So I think it literally took me till my senior year to beat him in basketball, which is kind of crazy. But I will humbly admit that, because I wasn't too bad at basketball. But so Dad and I sports was our thing from, I think it probably went to at least a dozen Cubs games with Dad. And man, he would have loved this year, even though we fell a little short. David and I had tickets for Game 5. We were sitting in the second row in the bleachers, and they got swept. God, we will talk when I get there. I don't know about that one. So, but those were great memories because those were things Dad and I just did together, going to Cubs games. We never had tickets. Dad always scout tickets. So the experience of driving there with Dad through the side streets of Chicago was always fun. Finding a place to park, and then, watching Dad haggle for tickets. And then, of course, as soon as the game was over, if you know Daddy hates crowds, so we would sprint like we were in a marathon, or like we were running the 100-yard dash to get out of there. So and beat the crowd. So great memories for me. Cubs games were awesome, and a lot of sports connections. There's a couple memories specifically when it comes to just sports that I remember. I'll never forget sitting in Dad's living room and watching the national championship in 1983 when NC State beat Houston on that last second air ball that got dunked to beat Houston. So it was such a great moment because one of the players for NC State was from Joliet Catholic, Terry Gannon. So Terry's dad and Dad taught at Joliet East together. So we knew the family, and of course that was one of the biggest upsets ever in the history of basketball. And I to this day I can remember Dad just absolutely exploding. I think it was an awesome memory. That and going to the only Bears game that he took me to was against the Packers. And so, other than watching the fights, which was pretty cool, between Packers and Bears fans, if any of you guys are Bears fans, which I'm sure there are some, if you remember the game, we were sitting on the goal line, point in midair. I mean, it was on ESPN forever. So, but I was watching and I was like, oh my God. He's like, what? I'm like, some dude just jumped out of the stands. I think he caught the ball. Look, there he is. And then it was on ESPN. So, great memories. And especially at the end, these last few years with Dad, we talked on the phone. I live in Texas and he was in Kansas City. We got to talk on the phone probably sometimes multiple times a week, but it was just basically an expected phone call for me, whether it was Monday Night Football, and then it was, we'll talk at halftime. And of course, if it was a Michigan game, if it was a Cubs game, or anything to do with Chicago, we would talk, throughout the game. So over the last few weeks, it's been kind of weird, especially as football season's gotten into full swing. I'll go to watch a game and I'm like, the phone? No, there's not going to be a phone call. So that's weird, not having those phone calls anymore to talk to Dad about the games. But that's how we connected through sports. And it was a cherished memory for me that I'll take with me. So, you know, as Dad's gone, and it's different losing a parent. Obviously, we're learning for the first time. And but for me, I get to see my dad live on in many different ways, but especially in my siblings. So that is pretty cool for me, even though a few days we've been here. But you know, I see my dad was never afraid to tackle any situation. By the way, my dad, I think, coached every known sport there is. And I don't think he knew anything about half of them. But he still was a coach. He was a swimming coach, a wrestling coach. So, I mean, I asked him, like, how do you coach him? He just go buy a book. So he was unafraid to take on any situation. And I see that in my sister Karen. You know, I see in my sister Sarah, Dad's heart for people, which we could talk for about a week straight about Dad's heart for people and his compassion to reach out to those people that were hurting, those people that maybe everybody had cast aside. I see that in you, Sarah. And of course in David, the storytelling, which you'll get a little taste of in a minute. He's much better at it. The storytelling and the, I don't even know what you want to call it, backing into deals, whether it's Dad with a garage full of stuff or David now with a garage full of stuff. You know, who knows what it is. But the storytelling. And in many other ways, those are just a few. So that's very, it helps to ease the pain of Dad being gone. Seeing it in my siblings. So, but you know, the last thing I'll share with Dad about my dad is, at the end of the day, sports was awesome. He loved to teach. But the most important thing to my dad was obviously spreading the news about Jesus. When I was going through a divorce, my dad flew out to Colorado, and of course he does not like to get on a plane, but he came out and spent the weekend with me, and we basically, you know, he just opened the Bible and just started showing me how to read the Bible, and started in the book of John, and that's basically where we spent the whole weekend. And so, you know, that was huge for me because it was a tough time in my life, and I was just beginning to try and walk in the direction of what it meant to follow Jesus, and that's always a little intimidating when you're on your own. So Dad came out and really helped me how to look at the Bible, how to read through the Bible. And then in the only way Dad could, we spent Friday night, Saturday night just driving around the churches and looking for people that were having worship. And he was unafraid of anything, and we would just walk in. So, but that's something I'll never forget as well. Because his heart obviously was to minister the good news of Jesus Christ, man. And he's spent his life doing it. So, I miss him, but you know, he carries on in all of us, and I'm thankful for that. So I'll pass it on to my sister.
Okay, so I'm not afraid of talking, but under these circumstances, if I start crying, I'm giving it over to him because I did write a speech. My memories of my father as a child were a lot of great ones. A lot of them were like, you'd be driving down the road and we'd see two hitchhikers. Next thing I know, they're in the car, coming home with us. My mom would be like, who are these people? And they'd be two hitchhikers now staying at our house for a few nights. Other memories are my dog Gigi when I was little. I had a little poodle named Gigi, and when my little brother came along, Gigi would bark a lot, so would wake him up. So we had to get rid of Gigi, and they were so kind to give it to my friend Carol Ann, who is my age, who's been at my wedding and been a family friend, and her mother, Ginger. And so Gigi got to be a part of my life through my friend. So we had many fun bantering back and forth about her stealing my pet Gigi. Then we move on to Duke. Do you remember Duke? No, you weren't alive. Oh, no, you were alive. I forgot. Gigi actually came first. Then there was Duke. Big, huge, white, what was it? Spaniel. I don't know. It was a big dog. I loved it. One day, the dog was gone. Well, where did Duke go? Well, my dad said he ran away. I said, okay. So, I don't know, years later, we go to this friend's house, and maybe he's even here. I don't even know. He's a big farm. And all of a sudden, I see, Dad, that looks like Duke. And he goes, yeah, it does. And he did not admit that that was my dog Duke, but to this day, I still don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was Duke. So if you were out there and had my dog named Duke, anyway, then growing up, my dad was a teacher, and I always remember, we lived on 229 Willow Street, Frankfort, Illinois. I've never forgotten that address. And I can always remember him coming up from teaching school, and I'm sure he didn't have a present for me every day, but I do remember him always having a gift, and whatever it was a gift, and it was just exciting to see my dad coming home from school. And then there was always, when school ended, it was the family vacations in the trailer, the pop-up tent thing that we'd pack up and go camping all summer and get a sticker at every place we went to. And you look at the pictures, and I don't think I really remember it, but I remember the pictures, like my brother and I in cowboy outfits at an Indian place, so. Remember that? Probably not. But you look at the pictures and you just think, yeah, I remember that. I probably don't, but I do remember it through the pictures. And I can go on and on. What I'm grateful for is that, things didn't work out with my mom and dad, but he married a wonderful woman, gave us 2 wonderful step-brother or half-brothers and sisters, whatever, they're brothers and sisters. And really, my dad was just one of the most kind-hearted, loving, nicest people that you'll ever meet. And I do see my dad and all of us in different ways, and that is the best gift he could leave. And I'm honored to be his daughter, and I'm gonna miss him. And I'm glad I got through this without crying.
Can everybody hear okay? I'm also going to try to get through this without crying, but I do have a backup plan. I wanted to start by explaining why I'm not wearing black today. My last birthday with Dad, not doing very well so far, but 1 month before he died, he made my mom take him to the store so he could pick out a dress for me, and this is what he picked. And just like what Karen said, he was always, he was always like surprising you with little things, I did the same thing at my wedding. Right in the middle of my vows, started crying, and Dad thought that I was laughing. And so he tried to go past the part where you say, and to be faithful, and I was crying, and people thought I was laughing. And so then Dad sort of tried to go past it, and I said, no, wait, I'm going to say it, and it's going to be the same today, I'm going to say it. I guess you could say I'm your stereotypical daddy's girl. Because in my mind, my dad could do no wrong. He was my role model, my mentor, father, and best friend. I would watch my dad just hand out clothes and food and medicine, money, furniture, washing machines, like, you name it, he would find it for you. If there was something you needed, he would track it down and get it to you, All those medicines he would pack up for Rosie. I remember I was working for an Indian doctor at the time, and any medicine that had gone to expire, Dad was like, save it for me, because I'm going to take it down to Mexico, Probably was not allowed to do that, but it didn't stop him. It helped so many people. I mean, just simple things like blood pressure medicine that they couldn't afford, and, anyway, Dad was amazing at networking. One time, Dad brought me to a house that needed to be cleared out. I think the person may have passed away, or maybe they were just moving. We started boxing things up, and I think I was probably about 12, and I found this sun lamp. And me desiring very much to be tan and beautiful at that time, I asked if I could have it. He was, sure, was his response. As I found with most things in life, my dad usually said yes, sure, or of course. He showed me how to love Jesus because I watched him love Jesus so well. He showed me how to laugh at life because even though he spent most of his time helping people out of bad situations or during a hard season of life, it never seemed to get him down. He never came home burdened or stressed or worried. He just was always laughing his way out of things and just always had this contagious, outrageous joy. I remember as an adult going through a particularly trying time. I called Dad to talk about it. This is when I lived in Scotland. I said, Dad, I'm really struggling. And his response was, well, you can always be thankful that you have two eyes instead of one, especially if that one was right in the middle of your forehead. I just laughed and, yep, you're right, Dad. Always got something to be thankful for. Just always taught me how to laugh at life. And I do have something to be thankful for. I'm thankful that I had 29 years with my dad. A dad who was a dad that I didn't have to love, but who I also liked, who I chose to spend my time with simply because I liked being around him. He never forced his opinions on me, which made me ask him for advice all the more. Dad and I were cut from the same cloth, and he just understood me, and I really needed that. I could go on talking all day about Dad, or crying talking about Dad, because I can't remember a time not wanting to talk about my dad. Like in high school, I would always be telling my friends funny stories that my dad did, you know. Oh, my dad brushed his teeth with Neosporin this morning, it was crazy, you know. Or Dad put his glasses in the microwave and nuked them for 40 seconds, you know, he's just like, it's crazy. I actually have these sections in my journal that say dad quotes or dad stories because he was constantly doing things that just made me laugh, and I just thought, one day I'm going to want to look back at these stories and just remember, and so now I'm doing that. But one of them was just like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. My mom said, yeah, your dad's always eating crazy things. Like, I had my paint set out on the table and he ate some of them. He thought they were chocolates. They were like this little... Which is totally something... I do the same thing. I put some bath salts in my mouth in Turkey because I thought they were candies. You know, it's like that aspect of him just always tickled me because he just... I think you described it in the sense of the ridiculous, you know? And so it just wouldn't think about things the way that other people thought about things, you know? And I just loved that. It was just so refreshing and just always cracked me up. What I'll miss most is talking to him. He was so kind, gracious, compassionate, funny, patient, not easily angered, generous, and smart. All the things that I want to be. He embodied so many of the characteristics of Jesus and just did it so naturally, never taking credit or proving something with his good deeds. He genuinely did them with no strings attached just because he wanted to. My dad was always doing something, but he was never in a rush. Never seemed stressed out, worried, tired, or burnt out. It still boggles my mind. He loved the Holy Spirit. He was always desiring more of the Lord, more of the Holy Spirit. In these last couple of years, even, he was just always, any chance he could, you know, he was telling people that were looking after him or whatever, you know, Jesus is God. Let's get more of the Holy Spirit, you know. When he would be feeling tired or sick or whatever, he'd say, just pray over me in tongues, you know. It was just Dad. He just loved the Holy Spirit. He was always hungry for more. That definitely inspired me. The last couple of years have been hard for sure, because Dad always been himself, but I'm so grateful for those years. God in His mercy made it so that we were together for these last 2 years before he died. They weren't the same as when I was at home and Dad and I could just hang out and go places. He didn't go many places these last couple of years. I used to just follow him around as he would help people, and we'd have breakfast and coffee together, and donuts and pizza. It was like we were always just eating together, you know. But these last years have made it so that I could say goodbye. It does hurt, but I know that his pain is no more. Now he's walking on streets of gold, laughing with Jesus with his contagious laugh I can still hear in my head and listen to on his teaching CDs. All of the words I tried to put together sounded inadequate, so I just wanted to conclude by reading a short poem written by Amanda Cook. Let the heroes rest and let the striving cease. I lay down my crown here at your feet. I will trust here in the mystery. I will trust in you completely. Awake my soul to sing with your breath in me. I will worship. You taught my feet to dance upon disappointment, and I will worship.
Amazing words. Well, I'm going to just follow suit a little bit and maybe stretch it a bit longer. And going to attempt to do something I saw Dad do. The greatest message I ever heard Dad give was in a setting like this. A dear friend of ours, Marcy Panoski, passed away. And Dad spoke at her memorial service. And it was probably the most heroic act I witnessed in that setting. The courage of Dad and testifying to the goodness of God in that setting was profoundly moving for me as a 12 or 13-year-old kid. But I remember him doing both, simultaneously honoring a person who had passed away and honoring their life lived for others and for Jesus, and then honoring the God that they had served, in this case, Jesus. And so I'm attempting to fulfill those shoes that I witnessed Dad stand in that moment. And it was a profound thing, and a profound thing to see Dad testify to a person who lived in faith and died in faith, you know? The last conversation I had with Dad, which is beautiful, as others, Steve and Karen and Sarah, have gotten to share, we were all there in the last days and week leading up to his death, which was amazing, and Mom and all the grandkids around, profoundly intimate and special. And there's a mystery, as others have experienced, in the loss of a loved one, and those waning moments when it's so near that what gets pulled out of you is everything that you wanted to say to a person that's about to die. And that's a special thing that we got to experience, because many don't. You lose a loved one so quickly, and you're not given the privilege, quite honestly, of being able to say some things and hear some things back. So we treasure those last days. And my last conversation with Pops was a Wednesday. He died Thursday the 24th, so this is a week prior on a Wednesday, and Molly and I went and visited Dad, and Dad was starting to just lose touch a little bit, which is how we knew that he was going to be going soon, just because he wasn't as sharp or as with it, which just gave way to some sheer hilarity, quite honestly, because Dad's quirky anyway. So if you remove any filter or any rationality, he becomes the most hilarious person on the planet. And the things that he said and did in those days were altogether outrageous. But this night with Molly and I there, which was one of the last days that he was speaking like full sentences and paragraphs, it was within a few days that he stopped talking altogether. So as he was there and you're trying to converse, all he could talk about was getting food to people. He talked about his friend Woody. I don't know if Woody's here. Woody was a dear friend of Dad's who managed the food warehouse that Dad was on the board of in their latter years here in Illinois. Dad worked with the food warehouse. I don't remember its actual name. Do you? Huh? Hands of Hope. Thank you. Hands of Hope. And Dad was talking about Woody the whole time as if Woody was in the room. which was interesting. And he kept saying, Woody, we got to get the food ready. And Molly and I were there, and they're like, Dad, Woody's not here. And we realized it was pointless to try to rationalize this moment, right? So I just entered into it, and I said, yeah, we've got the food, Dad. We've got the food, it's going to be okay. And after about 5 minutes of that, I realized how profound this moment was, you know? And Dad perhaps could be encapsulated. The two things he was most passionate about, I dare say, is getting food to people, physical food to people, as well as spiritual food. What was at the core of him was food for the needy and spiritual food for the hungry at heart. And Dad lived that and embodied that more than any other person I know. And I'll never forget that last conversation, Dad, I'll take care of it, which is kind of a jarring thing, you know, to say and pick up. Yeah, we'll take care of it, getting food to people, because he did it far and away better than anybody, you know, at least that I have witnessed and watched. Yeah, truly amazing. As Sarah commented, the thing that distinguished Dad from others was his unique ability and unique desire to help those in need. He was at his best when somebody needed something. And the way he responded and the gears that he shifted into when somebody needed something were profoundly inspiring and awe-inspiring. And Dad had a guy for everything. He had a guy for everything. If he needed a mechanic, he called his buddy Tony. If he needed an appliance, he called his buddy Barry. And the conversations went like this. Tony, I got this guy. He's got no money, but you got to help him out. I know he needs $1,000 worth of repairs. He's got no money. You got to help him out. And with Barry, this guy, the washer and dryer broke. They got no money. You got to help him out. If he needed lawyers' help, you know, he called Jerry. And Sarah commented, if he needed medicine, which is a shady thing, let's just call it what it is. I won't even voice the doctors that he called, because God forbid they get in trouble from these stories. Good Lord. Unbelievable. But he found a way to get aid and help to people who needed it. One of my favorite moments and most marking stories and encounters with Dad in this was that we were driving around Joliet one night for any given reason, and he says, we got to go see Cindy. And Cindy was a gal that Dad looked after for maybe 10, 12 years, and Dad's relentless patience with people who struggled with addictions, including poverty and cycles that kept repeating themselves over and over again. He stayed faithful to people unlike anybody else. And so Dad says, we got to go check on Cindy. And I'm like, all right. So we roll up to this apartment, and all the sights, sounds, and smells that you could imagine and anticipate in a building like that hit me, and I hit the door. And we walk inside and find Cindy there in a what seemed to be, at a 12-year-old level, a severe drug overdose. Sitting there and totally out of it. A huge cigarette in her hand that was just ash, she had never done anything with, and it was just ashing on the floor. And Dad quick, comes to her and looks over and kind of checks the bottles around, and he says, she's not done anything too much that's going to kill her. She's going to be okay. And he said, let's get her into bed. And we picked her up and set her into bed, and Dad just began to speak over her life and blessing in Jesus. And just kept saying, she's going to be okay. She's going to be okay. In the morning, she'll be totally fine. And I remember just watching that, thinking, what in the world is going on? And how in the world does this man know how to handle a situation like this with a person? That's what we're talking about, the God that's revealed in the person Jesus Christ. Then you are not talking about the God that Dad followed, worshiped, and obeyed. Because that was the God that Dad knew, and that was the God that Dad followed. And that person, Jesus, was Dad's favorite person of all time. And Jesus was, and I'm just going to go into a Jesus story, because that's what Dad would want for us to be reminded, maybe for the 100th time, or some for the first time, of this unique person, Jesus, that is the primary imprint and impact on Dad's life that caused him to live the way he lived. So Jesus is a man born 2,000 years ago into the most humble of beginnings, which, if there's one word that I would quickly access to describe Dad, it would be humble. And Dad in humility, and Jesus born in humility, born into the dirtiest stable that you could imagine, because from the word go, Jesus wanted to communicate to the world that he was not afraid of a mess. So much so that rather than be born into a palace, something pristine or clean or otherwise, he's born into a dirty manger. Again, demonstrating and communicating to you and I and to all humanity that he's not afraid of your mess or my mess. He's not afraid of the world's mess, so much so that he'll arrive in it and be born into it. And that Jesus lived 30 years of total normalcy like a carpenter. He was a carpenter. And you wouldn't have been able to pick him out of a crowd if somebody paid you $100 to. He was just like anyone else. And at some point, 30 years in, everything changes. And Jesus is baptized into the Jordan River by a man named John the Baptist. And as Jesus goes into these waters, he comes out, and all who were there heard a voice that came from the heavens and said over him, "This is my beloved Son. With him I'm well pleased." And when those words were spoken over Jesus, they weren't just spoken over him, they were spoken over you and I. Because Jesus is the new Adam. He was the firstborn of a whole new way, a whole new humanity. So when the Father speaks over the Son, he doesn't just speak it over his Son, he speaks it over all his sons and daughters. All of us get to hear those crazy, amazing words. "This is my beloved Son or daughter, with him I am well pleased." And all the lights turn on and are activated in Jesus. And for the next 30, 40 days, Jesus comes out and begins to say things that we have printed actually at the front of the program this morning, Isaiah 61, which was a calling that Dad carried and embodied. And it was the calling that Jesus, at 30 years old, soon after his baptism, goes into the Jewish temple, because lest we forget, he's a Jewish man, right? That's what he looks like. Goes into a temple on an ordinary day and opens up a scroll, which is where the words of the Old Testament would have been written, and says these things: "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord are upon me now, because he has sent me and called me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted," which means those that have severe pain and brokenness in their hearts, to come and tend to those wounds and mend those wounds. He's also sent me to open blind eyes, and he sent me to deliver captives from their prisons. Isn't that amazing? Jesus sets down the scroll, and not a word is spoken there in that moment. As kind of awe and a hush fell upon the people of like, this is a normal dude, Jesus. He's the carpenter. What on earth is he doing saying these things about himself? And from that point forward, Jesus would begin to demonstrate the true character and nature of the Father like no one else. Jesus walked about doing good for all people. As he encountered blind people, he opened their eyes because he designed them to see the beauty that was created for them. As he encountered deaf people, he opened their ears because their ears were designed to hear the voice of a Father who speaks pleasure and light over them. I love when Jesus comes upon a scene where a woman who's been caught in adultery is about to be stoned. He comes into this scene, and all the religious leaders of that day are holding huge boulders, getting ready to pounce this woman. And as Jesus comes into it, he breaks that thing apart and looks around and says, "If anybody here is without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone." Because as far as he could tell, there was no one there that was more righteous that could do and act like killing a woman like that. Which is again Jesus revealing his heart for people that were otherwise dirty, downcast, outcasted, and estranged. A woman broken, beaten down, caught in the act of adultery. And in those days, deserving of this level of punishment. And Jesus breaks it up and says, "Woman, you're forgiven. You're forgiven. Go on and don't continue this. Go and live a different way, because now you're clean, you're whole, and you're forgiven. And I see you as you really are." That's the Jesus, right? That's the Jesus that reveals the true nature of God the Father and the true nature of a loving Father, for that matter, yeah? Jesus moves about, and as you've heard at any wedding you've attended, shows up and decides that these people deserve the best wine. So let's go ahead and turn 500 gallons of water into it so that this can be a real party that all can enjoy. Again, baffling the religious minds that think, well, surely God is too pious to bring along an alcoholic beverage to a wedding. God forbid, right? And Jesus was not about to play that game or get caught in that box of do's and don'ts and won'ts, but shows that the Father loves a party, and Jesus loves a party. And he did it just because he could, because the people would receive it as a gift. Jesus went about, whenever he encountered a storm, he spoke to it and quieted it, demonstrating that he had authority over all the earth and using it for the betterment of others. Jesus heals paralytic men that drop through roofs. When he's there, he looks to sea of people, sees a paralytic who can't walk, and speaks to him and heals him right there on the spot. It's amazing. I love the moment when Jesus is walking through the streets, and a man who had leprosy, which leprosy in those days, if you can imagine the disease that carries the most stigma, I mean, perhaps in the last 2 decades it would be HIV/AIDS, that which is not just horrific physically, but it's horrific emotionally because of what it brings upon you in the way of shame and in the way of frustration and condemnation. And the lepers of those days were the outcasts of outcasts. Those are those that were called the unclean, the unworthy, the unlovable, literally the untouchable, because if you touched a leper, it was believed that you would contract leprosy yourself, which was a severe disease that ate away your skin and caused your limbs to fall off. So it was semi-understandable, the fear, right? What made it even worse is the way that you were diagnosed with leprosy is that you presented yourself to the religious leader, in those days a Jewish rabbi, and the rabbi would look you over, and if he deemed that you had leprosy, he would pronounce over you unclean. And from that point forward, you had to walk about the streets announcing over yourself for everyone to hear, unclean, 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 unclean. Because God forbid that anybody should not know that you have leprosy and accidentally touch you and contract the disease yourself. The most shameful sickness of those days. If a husband found out he had leprosy, he had to, in the moment, leave his wife and his family and live on the outskirts of town, not able to see or interact with them again, but from a distance. And then this day, a leper runs in through the crowd to where Jesus is. And you gotta imagine, parents are hiding their children, running away, because again, that's what you were taught to do if a leper showed up. You run away, you don't stay, you get as far away from that person as possible. And in all seriousness, friends, this is why I follow Jesus, this moment right here. This man comes before Jesus and says, Master, Rabbi, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus does the most profound thing. Jesus reaches out his hand, probably at the disdain of his disciples, who are like, you can't touch that guy, man. Jesus, if you touch that unclean person, you yourself will be unclean, right? Because that's the culture, that's what's taught. You've been taught that from day one. Don't go near a leper. And Jesus reaches out his hand and touches the leper and heals him completely. You can imagine the shock and the awe and the excitement of that man and the wonder of the people around him. And Jesus does this, right? Just because he loves the man, but also he sends a message for all history, for all humanity, for all mankind, that this God is not afraid of a mess. He's not afraid of shame. In fact, he runs right in the midst of it and delivers people out of it and calls them forward and says, stand up. You're no longer unclean. You're no longer dirty. You're no longer outcasted. That's not who you are. Isn't that amazing? This is the Jesus that works, Dad. This is the Jesus that reveals what God the Father is like. This is the true gospel, good news. That's all. When you hear that churchy word, gospel, it's just good news. And we all love good news. Good news is the best news. And Jesus, from the word go, was communicating it and demonstrating good news. And to further drive home the point of not just healing one leper, he heals 10 more. Just to further drive home the point that he loves to engage a mess and calls it clean in a moment and changes everything. Now perhaps two of the most unusual acts happen there in the waning moments of Jesus' life on this planet, right? He's there hanging on a cross, crucified for crimes that he did not commit, and is there hanging, and a person next to him who is there for similar reasons, right, of crimes that he committed, looks at Jesus and says, I think that you're who you really say you are, and if you are, I'd love to be where you're going. Then the other guy, there's 3 that are there on that day. The other guy is ridiculing this guy, saying, "You idiot, what are you doing? He's nobody special. Look at him, he's on a cross just like you, just like I." And this other guy has some simple faith or hope about this Jesus that's there hanging, and he says to him, No, I think that there's something about you. And Jesus says, "Oh, friend, it's going to be a good day, because today you'll be with me in paradise when we both die and leave this earth." Isn't that amazing? And then a moment that I love is Jesus there, the suffering, pain, and punishment that he was experiencing, looks to his mother, Mary, and says, "John, my buddy, I need you to look after my mom." And it's why I know that I can stand up here and know that my mom's going to be in good hands, because Jesus, at his worst and most intense moment, is thinking about somebody else. And he's thinking about his mother, Mary. And so we know, Mom, that you're going to be cared for, because Jesus loves to look after women. That at that point, Joseph had already gone on, so she had no husband, and Jesus was the oldest son, so it was his responsibility to take care of Mom, which is something I joyfully pick up, right? And we do as well, knowing that my mom, Ruth, is going to be well cared for. And you're amazing, Mom. We love you. We all think you're amazing here. Yeah. Mercy. If this is such a rare thing, you know, a rare moment like this. It's so wonderfully pregnant and sentimental. What I desire most is simply to give people the opportunity to respond to Jesus. And I'm going to do so in a way that Dad would want and hope for, you know. But the amazing thing about Jesus is that he is so profoundly kind and tender that he doesn't come rushing at you to force you into anything. And if you could imagine life from the beginning, right before you're born, just follow me for a second, and Jesus is there talking to you before you're about to be born, and you're having a dialogue with him, which is of course just something that we're constructing in our imagination, so go with me, people. And Jesus is like, "Well, this is going to be awesome. But do you want the good news or the bad news first?" I guess take the bad news first. The bad news is that where you're about to go, though amazing, is filled with people who don't know how loved they are. And because they don't know how loved they are, they don't actually know how to treat another person. And because they're not treating others out of love, there's a lot of damage that's being done in the place that you're about to go. And furthermore, because people don't know that they're loved, and you might find this difficult as well as you grow up. You won't know right away how special and loved you are, and therefore you won't treat yourself with love, and you're going to do a lot of damage to yourself. You're going to do some things that are going to hurt you, and there's going to be a lot of things that happen around you that are done by people that don't realize that I intended them for love and intended others to give love to them, and it's going to cause some pain, and it's going to cause some hurt. And because I'm making you an emotional person, you're going to get to experience both the good of that and also the pain of that, because there's going to be loss, and you're going to lose people that are important to you. You're going to have questions of why could this happen, and you're going to struggle to reconcile love with loss and love with pain. And that's the bad news. That's going to be difficult for you at times. And you're sitting there thinking, well, what the heck am I going there for, right? And she's like, the good news is this place that you're going, I created out of love. Everything that you see is an expression of my love, and you get to enjoy Earth. And there are amazing people. You're going to be born into a family, and you're going to get to experience the care of a mother and father. You're going to get to have relationships with people, and you're going to be surprised by how good life is. You get to enjoy it. And honestly, that's why I'm saying, I want you to enjoy life and enjoy it to the full. It's a good thing. And the best news about the good news is that all of that damage that you're going to get to experience one way or another, to one degree or another, all of the pain and all of the damage that you'll do to somebody else unintentionally, all the damage that you'll do to yourself perhaps unintentionally, and all the damage that's done to you by people, I've got an amazing plan for all of that damage. I'm going to take all of that damage, and you're going to get accustomed to this word sin. And sin is just damage. It's just what people do when they don't know how loved and special they are. It's what they do when they don't know that the other person in front of them is just as loved and special as they are. And all of that damage, I'm going to take it upon myself. And for the rest of your days, you won't have to pay for that. Which means this: imagine from this day forward, you walk out, and everywhere you go, the bill has already been paid. You show up to eat lunch, and somebody's like, wow, somebody paid for your lunch. Wow, that's a good day. You get home to pay your electric bill. Oh, somebody paid your electric bill. Wow, that's 2 for 2. I'm doing good here. The next day you begin to pay your mortgage, and it's been paid. It's been paid. It's been paid. Because Jesus knew that there was a payment for all the damage that was going to be done for all time, throughout all history. And he said, I've got an amazing plan. I'll take it upon myself and freely give people the opportunity to say yes to my payment for their damage. Isn't that amazing? And you think, that's too good to be true. There's no way that that could be it. And Jesus smiles and says, you're going to have to go figure it out. You're going to have to go figure it out on your own. And that's what all of us are figuring out to one degree or another, yeah? Napoleon Bonaparte, just to quote a historian, as Dad loves history, this is one of the most fascinating quotes I've read about Jesus. Napoleon said this. He said, I know men, and I tell you that this Jesus Christ is no mere man. Just for the record, I got this out of Time magazine. Between him and every other person in the world, there is no possible term of comparison. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I, we all founded our empires. But on what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire upon love. And at this hour, millions of people would die for him. Isn't that amazing? Maybe Anita and Jeff and James come on back up. We're just going to sing a song or two. And as we do, friends, you can imagine my dad being up here simply saying to you, you're amazing, you're profoundly special, you're all dearly loved. There is not a religious bone in my dad's body. Religion puts pressure and places demands on people and says you have to look like this, and you have to jump through this hoop, and you have to go to this place, and you have to be like that. That is not the person of Jesus. The person of Jesus is one profoundly important and incredible word, and it's inclusive. Jesus doesn't leave you outcasted or at a distance. He includes you into himself. And Dad was the ultimate includer of people. From the dirtiest, the roughest, the most smelly, all the way to whatever class we would recognize. And that is the person beauty of Jesus. So our dear friend Anita is going to sing a song, a solo. You need a mic, I'll give it to you in a second. And as she does, friends, just be permitted to engage Jesus however you want in your heart individually. And if you're going to have a relationship with Jesus, you need to learn to talk to Jesus. And that's done very normally, right? Relationship and conversation with Jesus is not reserved for ivory towers, right? For the religious elite. It's moments like this and every other moment in between. And I would simply give you this. Let your conversation start with, forgive me for not believing that you are altogether loving and kind. And furthermore, forgive me for all the damage that I've done for someone else, to someone else, and for all the damage that's been done for me, that you never intended, because love never intended damage for you or for me. It didn't. That's why he sent a plan in motion called Jesus to take all of the damage, take it into himself, die with it in death, and raise in resurrection, and say everything is new. And everyone belongs to me. He said yes to you before you can even conjure a response in this moment. And he loves you the same at your best day as much as your worst day. That is the Jesus that we say yes to. And I simply say, friends, you're amazing. I love you. I'm so honored to share this moment with you. And to say, man, this is the dad that I knew, man. This is dad. This is dad's Jesus. I believe it's the true Jesus. Bless you, friends. We'll enjoy a song from Anita, and then James is going to lead us in the song after.